Hola! Today, we're going to take our second to last batch of notes for this school year. So we're getting there. We're getting close to the end of this year. Yay! So what we're going to discuss today is ¿Qué nos hacemos? ¿Qué me hago? What do we do to ourselves? What do I do to myself? Los verbos reflexivos. You may have noticed on your current vocab sheet that we have a tremendous number of verbs on the front page with two letters, extra letters at the end of the infinitive, the letters SE. And what we're going to do today is walk you through some steps for how to conjugate the verbs. What I'll be doing is walking you through a breakdown of how to conjugate them that may make the process simpler for some of you. There are also others of you who may see the very basics of this or may see this once and say, I don't need to follow these steps. I can do this all at once in my head. Or I can do this all at once without having to follow the steps. So ultimately, you conjugate these verbs in the end in the way that's best for you. But I do provide a short four-step process, or hopefully it's a short four-step process for you to break things down more for those who work better with steps to follow and a breakdown of what to do in order to conjugate these verbs. So let's get started. So once again, you've noticed that you've got all these verbs in the vocab sheet, hopefully, and hopefully you have it in front of you, with the extra letters se, S-E, at the end, okay? And so how do we know that a verb's reflexive when we see it for the first time? We'll see a reflexive pronoun attached to the end. And those letters S-E attached to the end of all these verbs that you see on the front of your vocab sheet for como te preparas are reflexive pronouns. So se is an example of a reflexive pronoun. We use reflexive verbs and reflexive pronouns to talk about things that we do to or for ourselves. So for example, I brush my hair, I brush my teeth, I go to bed, I get dressed, I wash my hands. We use reflexive verbs to talk about doing all of these things. And you'll note, of course, that as we get a little more into this and then into the next short unit, which has to do with la ropa, clothing, that there are some verbs that we'll be using much more often than others, much more frequently, the high frequency verbs, and those are the ones that you'll have to be most familiar with, okay? So now let's get into conjugating verbos reflexivos. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss that short four-step process that I mentioned to you to break things down. And what we're going to do at the bottom of the first page is los primeros dos pasos, the first two steps. Paso means step, just so you're aware, okay? And we use prepararse as our sample verb. Now you saw preparar on its own in the previous unit as to prepare. Prepararse means to get ready. So you're getting yourself ready for school or getting yourself ready to go out with your friends or getting yourself ready for work, okay? And we're going to be conjugating these first en el presente, and we'll go on to el pretérito a little bit at the end. What you need to do initially is drop the letters se, S-E, at the end of the verb. So if you get rid of the letters se, S-E, at the end of the verb, you're left with preparar. And you go ahead and you're going to conjugate the verb for step 2. And make sure that you write down these conjugations in the box at the bottom of la primera página of page 1 of the notes packet. So you have preparo, preparas, prepara, preparamos, preparáis, and preparan. Once you've got that down, go on to the top of página 2. Now, we're going to start dealing with los pronombres reflexivos, the reflexive pronouns. And one thing you need to be aware about is that there is a reflexive pronoun to match up with each verb conjugation in Spanish. So you'll see, for example, as you write these down, myself is me in Spanish, and me is used with the yo form of the verb, regardless of whether you're conjugating it in the present or the preterite or any other tense. Te is yourself, and you use this with the to conjugation of a verb. Se is used for himself, herself, and yourself, and that goes with the la usted conjugation of the verb. And if you look to the right, actually directly to the right of the first se, you'll note that se is also used for themselves and yourselves. So it goes with an ellos or ustedes conjugation of a verb as well. The following two boxes in the top right, we have ourselves as nos. This goes with the nosotros conjugation. And yourselves in España only is os, which goes with the vosotros conjugation. Once you've got these down, and potentially have written down which verb conjugations they match up with, if need be, if it's beneficial to you, go on to the next slide and move on to paso cuatro, el cuarto paso, step 4, fourth step. Now what you need to do is put everything together. And the big thing to remember when you're doing reflexive verbs is that after you've conjugated the verb, if you choose to do this 4-step process, you need to go back and put the reflexive pronoun, the matching reflexive pronoun, as a separate word in front of your conjugated verb. So once you've done this, you've conjugated a reflexive verb in the present tense. What you see here is me preparo, te preparas, se prepara, nos preparamos, os preparáis, and se preparan. Whenever you're asked to conjugate a reflexive verb, you need to make sure that you have that reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugated verb, because if you do not do so, it's not going to be counted as correct or completely correct. Now, once you've got this down, pausa el video, and on página 3, you want to try to conjugate the reflexive verb quitarse, to take off. Quitar on its own without the reflexive pronoun means take away, but quitarse means take off, on your own. And then complete números 1 a 7 at the bottom of página 3, and have me check over your work before moving on to the rest of the notes on página 4, por favor. Now, we're going to finish up here. You follow the exact same steps that you would use to conjugate a verb en el presente, but you conjugate the verb in the preterite. So the verb we have here as an example at the top of página 4 is quedarse. So what you would do to conjugate quedarse in the preterite, and you'll note that the example here is with steps 1 through 4 completed. If you want to conjugate it on your own, and these are the steps you should follow for arreglarse and ponerse, which are the two examples you're going to do on your own at the bottom of página 4, is you want to make sure that you forget about the me for a few minutes, and the se, the reflexive pronoun, for a few minutes. Conjugate the verb that remains en el pretérito in the preterite. So for quedarse, you want to conjugate quedar, as you see in the example here. And for your two example verbs on the bottom that you're going to try on your own, you want to try to you're going to conjugate arreglar and then poner en el pretérito. And please remember that poner is an irregular verb en el pretérito in the preterite. So you may want to look that up in your irregular preterite notes. Once you're done with that, you need to remember that you've got all those reflexive pronouns, me, te, se, nos, os, se, and that each one matches up with the conjugation. And then you place the correct reflexive pronoun in front of the conjugated verb en el pretérito. So what you end up with for quedarse, to stay or to remain, in the preterite is me quedé, I stayed, te quedaste, you stayed, se quedó, he or she stayed or you stayed, formal. Nos quedamos, we stayed. Os quedastes, you all stayed. And se quedaron, they stayed, or you all stayed. The os quedastes, remember, is vosotros and only in España. Now, what you need to do, you're at the end of the video here. Do your best to conjugate the verbs at the bottom of página 4, and then complete the activity at the top of página 5, 1 a 7. And in the end, finally, what you will do is go back to Canvas and please complete any additional practice activities if needed. Okay, gracias.